Can you move it? There. Thank you. This is really fun. You guys get to see it in stereo. Ooh, I get to do this. This is exciting. Happy day. We're moving forward. Happy Palm Sunday, everyone. We had the great blessing this last week, Riemann and I. We both had both of our shots a few weeks ago and were immune to the disease after, 2 weeks later. Anyway, we flew to California and visited our children and grandchildren at Ananda Village this week. They were on Easter break. The school there is in session, and the children are required, if they have contact with anyone outside of their household, to get tested and have a few days before starting school again. So this was the week that we could be there. And it was delightful. We hadn't seen them in 18 months. Little Jay is now 5, and Tulsi, the girl, is now 7. And this was an important year and a half. They learned to read, they learned to write. I mean, they grew like a foot each, It was just amazing to see, and we were sort of sad that we'd missed all that, but we got to see it. We did a lot of reading. Jay really likes math, so he kept asking us to give him math problems and, double-digit, triple-digit, addition, multiplication. I mean, he was amazing for a 5-year-old, And Grandpa Tata, they call him, played basketball with Jay, and he said, I made 150 baskets, which he had, and he said they're each worth 2 points, so that's 300 points. He was really excited, and so were we. It was really fun to see. He taught me to play Uno, and it was delightful. Jay is, his parents call him the animal whisperer. And he explained to me he will go up to a lizard or a bird, and he'll stand there and get very quiet. And he'll think loving thoughts about them. And then they will quietly come to him and climb on him or land on him, the birds, and he'll spend time with them. And he said, it's really nice, Mama, because they're my friends. And I thought, wow, most boys that age are chasing them and capturing them and doing all these things. And he's just calmly, quietly communing with them as a 5-year-old, but he's onto something, and I'm going to tie it all together in a few minutes. And Tulsi, the 7-year-old, she's not Tulsi dog. I think she came first. I can't remember, but anyway, in my mind, she came first. The farm dog is called Tulsi dog. And it's a boy and she's a girl. But anyway, she's playing violin. And she's playing really well. She's going to turn into a pianone and Ethan because, all the notes were just right. You know how little kids, when they play, they screech. But there wasn't any of that. It was real. And 3-4 times a day she would practice on her own. She just loves it. So it was delightful. And she told me, she said, the secret, Mama, is practice makes perfect. And I just chuckled. My daughter, Gita, was sitting there, our daughter, and I told a story on her that I've shared with some of you through the years, where Gita, when she was in first grade, and by the way, she had the same teacher that our grandchildren have now. When she was in first grade, her teacher called me in and said, you know, Gita's bright, but she's just refusing to write her letters. And so I went home and talked to her about it, asked her why, and she couldn't really articulate it at first. And finally she said, well, in the book, the letters look beautiful. And when the teacher puts them on the board, they look beautiful. But when I try to write them, they don't look beautiful. You know, she's just learning to write, right? And I said, well, you have to practice. And, you know, in time they will look beautiful, but you have to keep practicing. So we had a good joke about that, the three of us. Practice makes perfect. That was the lesson that Mama learned. But of course, it's a spiritual lesson for all of us, because that's what it is with our spiritual practices. At first, they may not, you know, be just right in alignment. It takes time and sensitivity to tune in to the inner life, to the energies in the spine. And then once we do, it's, you know, it's the road to perfection, the practice of this. And it may take months, years, lifetimes, who cares? As long as we keep trying, eventually we will have that experience. That's the divine promise. And then Gita herself, our daughter, she's gotten into horses. And she used to be into horses. She had a horse when she was a preteen and teenager at Ananda village. Now she has 4 horses, and she works with them, and she's training them, and she lets people come in and be with them. And she explained to me that, and I didn't know this, all of you might know it, but horses are not predators. They're not hunting animals like dogs and most other animals. They're vegetarian. They just eat the grass and the hay. And they live in community. They live in a herd. And they know about cooperation. And so she said, when you're kind to a horse and you're with them, they mirror back to you your own feelings, your own thoughts. And then in time, first you have to recognize what your feelings and thoughts are, and then you can learn to work with them. And she brings Yogananda and God into having people move through all of that with the horses. And it was just delightful to see. Well, I was thinking that in India they revere the cow, and the cow gives milk, absolutely. They have that on the horses, but they also are not predators. They also eat grass and don't hunt. They're calm, peaceful animals, and they also live in a herd. And so it's interesting. I had never thought about it that way, and it, to witness it was inspiring. Anyway, it's Palm Sunday. I'm going to get back to the topic here. And the crowd, as the reading was talking about, it hailed the Christ as the king, but obviously the vast majority of them did not understand what kind of king that he was. And so the point being that in crowd consciousness, people can get caught up in the frenzy of it. And just because there's a lot of people caught up in it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true and that it's in the highest, in their own interest and in the interest of others. And so I remember at age 19 when I found this path and when I found Ananda village in California before it was really even a village, when it was just a retreat in the beginning, I understood for spiritual reasons why I wanted to live that life and have all my adult years. But an extra benefit was that it takes you far from the maddening crowd. It sort of took me out of the material and frenzied currents of current society. And you're in it, you connect with it, but you don't live in it all the time. And that's, in my view, that was a conscious choice. And so here we were raising our children there. They were born and raised there. And children don't choose to have that kind of life. You hope that they get some benefit from it, but they may or may not. They may rebel against it. Who knows what their karma is. But I tried at least to have them not become overwhelmed with materialistic consciousness. And to me, one of the things was, like for our daughter, it was Barbie dolls. For our son, it was G.I. Joes. To me, those represented the epitome of material consciousness. Maybe they didn't, but to me they did. So I didn't want them in my house, but then they have cousins and grandparents, you can't totally protect them from these things. You can just do your best to explain to them why it's maybe a good idea to just, as they did, go outside, play, build your forts, climb your trees, play your fantasy games, do imaginary things. And they did. They did. But those things still, those toys represented that kind of consciousness to me. And I was just trying to get them to think for themselves and not be influenced by fads and things like that. And so the battle that looms with Palm Sunday is that juxtaposition between the ego and the soul. And the representation of Easter is the victory of the soul over ego in the resurrection that takes place after the crucifixion. And so this world does not support meditation or our spiritual practices. It's just a frenzy of activity. But we also ourselves don't support our spiritual practices internally. We're constantly in conflict between wanting to meditate and be peaceful and devotional and getting caught up in, different emotions and fears and, movies and books, all kinds of things that bring us into more frenzied activity, discotheques, you name it. We take a step forward and we take 2 steps back, and we just keep doing that throughout our lives. And we put each other in boxes, you are this, you always do that. We do that to ourselves. I am this, I always do that. My poor mother, I don't want to pick on her, but she, when I was 9 years old, I liked French toast. So whenever we went to a restaurant when I was an adult, oh, well, she's going to order French toast because she loves French. It's a little thing, but it's symbolic, but we do that to each other. And what we want to do is look for the light in ourselves first, in our meditation and throughout today, and in our lives. And that reminds me of a beautiful image in the movie A Beautiful Mind that came out a long time ago with Russell Crowe. And he plays Mr. Nash, who was a brilliant mathematician, but he had, schizophrenia. And so he would see these imaginary people, and he couldn't distinguish between the imaginary and the real, and it drove him mad at times, drove him crazy at times. Yet he was this brilliant mathematician, and with the help of his wife, he persevered. And eventually he won the battle. And he also got a Nobel Prize for his discovery in mathematics. And one day after winning that, he was walking along with a friend, and the friend asked him, "Do you still see those imaginary people?" And right then in the movie, they image those people, the imaginary people, walking along with them. And Mr. Nash says, "Yes, I see them, but I choose not to pay attention to them. I choose not to give them energy." And that is brilliant, really, and it's something that speaks exactly to this point, is we all have a spark of divinity within us, and we can choose to look for that divinity in everybody we're in contact with. Don't look at the mistakes. Like they say, every road has some puddles. We all have them. Look for the light in ourselves and in each person. And it becomes even more relevant when it's somebody we have a hard time with, or somebody who is maybe being really dark in that moment. Looking for the light and having that as a practice is so important. It's a little bit like little Jay, the animal whisperer, because he's looking for that light in the lizard and in the bird, and they feel that, and they come to him, and they add to his light. So not only do you help somebody when you're looking for the light in them, but it's a win-win, because then that light also, their light also magnetizes to yours and helps it to become brighter. You know, I wanted to share a story in closing that Devi shared with us this week. Nayaswami's Jyotish and Devi are the spiritual directors of Ananda Worldwide, and right now they're living at Ananda Village. And they came to see us in Gita's and Badri's backyard on the patio so we could have a little visit, brief. And they had just gotten their Moderna shots, and we had just gotten our Pfizer shots, and we were talking about that. And Gita and Devi shared that a real good friend of theirs in India, her mother was battling cancer for 10 years. And they're a very well-off family. And they researched all over, and they found that there was a laboratory in Germany where they were experimenting with cancer vaccines. And they decided the whole family picked up and went to Germany with the mother. And they met the doctor working in the laboratory doing that, and he worked on the therapy with her mother, but her mother was pretty far gone already. Anyway, she brought for that doctor 6 copies of Autobiography of a Yogi and a picture of Babaji. And he loved that picture, and he put it at his laboratory there. And he read the autobiography, and he fell in love with that as well. Well, it turns out now COVID breaks out, and that laboratory experimented with creating a vaccine for COVID, and it's the Pfizer laboratory. So the Pfizer laboratory in Germany, where they discovered the vaccine for COVID, has a picture of Babaji in it. And that, I mean, how sweet is that? You know, the divine are constantly looking out for us in ways that we cannot even possibly imagine. So I thought to share that story. It has no right-on context for this particular topic, except when you look for the light, amazing things can happen. Joy to you.
I'd like to read from Whispers